So when I gave a speech in New York on this topic, I had asked all the men in the room to stand. And while standing, I had them look at every woman that was sitting down. I reminded them that the women that were sitting there were friends and colleagues. I reminded them that according to the National Sexual Violence Resource Center in the United States, 1 in every 3 women will experience some form of contact sexual violence. Now, according to the UK, 44% of women after the age 16 will experience some form of physical violence. So we're talking 33% of Americans and 44% of women in the UK that will experience some form of physical or sexual violence. That's every 92 seconds in the United States that a woman is sexually assaulted. This is clearly a worldwide felt problem with an unacceptable frequency. The men were still standing, right? So now that I've hit them with these terrible gathering statistics, I asked them how they felt about being standing in the room. They said they felt targeted, uncomfortable. Another man literally raised his hand and said he felt bad and wanted to sit. They looked so uncomfortable, like if I didn't have them cornered as a speaker, they would have already figured out how to leave the room. But then I asked the men, by a show of hands, how many of you think twice these days before you ask a female colleague out for drinks? Do you know how many of them raised their hand? All of them. Every single man in the room raised his hand. Even the AV guy that was sitting in the back raised his hand, right? So it's not specific to our industry. I'll give you one more statistics. In the United States, as many as 10% of sexual assaults are falsely reported. So what we just saw by this exercise is that these men are afraid of what an unnecessary interaction could cost them. So not only is sexual violence incredibly prevalent, but men now feel uncomfortable as well. There's something that we have to look at when we think of the push for gender diversity. It's been the most strongly advocated diversity initiative for the last several years in our industry. But whether it's due to fear or just general cultural times, women are missing out on the relationship building time required to progress to senior ranks. Susan Wojcicki, the CEO of YouTube, is quoted for saying that at the end of the day, both men and women who become CEOs have showed tenacity and hard work to succeed in their careers. And regardless of gender, CEOs are measured by the same criteria: the growth and success of the business. However, just this year, Forbes reported that only 6.6% of CEOs in Fortune 500 companies are women. So it begs the question, if the criteria for success is the same, and gender diversity has been our focus, why is that number so low? Maybe the answer is just that simple. We've heard it many times today. For more women executives, we need more women employees. As leaders and hiring managers, we have heard it thousands of times in our companies that we need to diversify our candidate pool. We are proud supporters of women in finance. We need to be a diverse organization. We are proud of the diversity culture that we have. We've all heard this, right? But if that were true, genuinely true, we would probably see more diversity in our senior ranks. So to put it lightly, I'm going to call them out on it. Albert Einstein said one of my favorite quotes. He said, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them." It's a proven idea that diversity of thought is our key to success. In case there's some skeptics in the room, let me give you a case study. Harvard Kennedy did a study on the nuclear electric power company Exelon. Over the course of 6 years, Exelon increased its diversity at the management level and increased its representation of women and people of color on the board by 7%. When prompted, Exelon pointed to its bottom line as evidence of diversity's strong financial impact. Since 2013, Exelon's shareholder return has increased by 120%, and their share price has increased by 73%. There is a tangible ROI linked to diversity. But there is a key piece that we have been forgetting. Psychologist Bill Crawford stated that diversity, or the state of being different, is not the same as inclusion. One is a description of what is, while the other describes a style of interaction essential for effective teams and organizations. The problem is that as an industry, we are addressing diversity with set targets, but that does not address culture. It is a truly inclusive company culture which organically creates diversity. Now, organizational change starts with our leaders. It starts at the top. We've heard that all day. And you may be saying, that's great, but that's not my job. That job belongs to the CEO. But let me tell you a story. When I was designing the 3-year culture strategy, I spent countless hours with our COO designing a program that we thought was custom fit to our organization, because our diversity and culture problems must be just specific to our bank. In there was a title that I thought was required to achieve organizational change. Once ready, we took it to the CEO. There were many problems we needed to solve. Is this a global rollout or a locally focused execution? Which areas of diversity are we really willing to say that we're going to touch? How much money am I willing to spend? And what am I actually going to get out of this? It took several meetings to answer these questions, and many of them were incredibly heated. Because if you've ever asked a CEO for money, it's worse than parting with a baby for a toy, right? But there's one day that comes to mind in particular. It was a day of quarter earnings. We had every problem that you can imagine. We had bad quarter earnings, critical personnel risk, a security breach. It was a chaos, right? So my meeting with the CEO got interrupted. But he asked me to come back, and when I did, we got interrupted again, and then several more times throughout the day. So in short, my 2 p.m. meeting was me running in and out of his room till about 7 p.m. at night. There's a key detail to note here. He sits on the trade floor in a glass office that can be seen by almost every major player of the U.S. organization. It wasn't until a week or two later when I learned a valuable lesson. Now remember, I was asking for the big title to make this organizational change, right? I was walking through the corridor and one of the senior directors stopped me. And he said, "Did you solve that big problem downstairs?" Now, mind you, I have no idea what he's talking about, right? I actually actively avoid this person. So being in regulatory, there's a problem every day, so I had to ask him to be more specific. And he said, there was talk of a lot of heated discussions downstairs. We were all just curious if it got worked out. I was taken aback, right? So for context, I run the regulatory technology group, which means that I oversee all regulatory response and compliance for technology for the United States. What maybe didn't occur to me is that a very heated 5-hour interrupted meeting between me and the CEO might be a cause for concern, right? So it was right then that I realized not only is the organization watching him, but they're watching me too. I took several days to think about what it is I wanted to take away from this. And I decided that I'm going to make it my mission to impact culture. Without a new division, without a new title, today, I run the US CSR Initiatives for Scotiabank. Next week, Scotiabank will have their first US-wide 5-location, coast-to-coast event with volunteers raising money for kids' cancer research. We have a collated group of volunteers endorsed globally by senior leaders dedicated to impacting talent retention and culture, which I lead. And we have an overall improved sentiment of employee engagement. Now, I'm not telling you to bite off a new project. What I'm telling you is that regardless of your title, today, you have the power to make change. What I had realized is that I was a leader all along. You are all leaders today. I guarantee that whether you know it or not, someone in your organization is watching you, and specifically watching how you handle certain situations. So I have a little homework for you. These things won't necessarily be the biggest change, but it will start with you, because it starts at the top, and you are already there. First, strive to always be respectful and evaluate your blind spots. A leader has a way of addressing their peers and subordinates, right? And by requiring a level of professionalism while in your presence, you have just made it so that you are now a leadership mark in that organization. Gossip is a really easy way to start. I love gossip. TMZ is one of my guilty pleasures. But when you're in the office and you hear somebody talking about gossip, what's the thing you think of at the end, whether it was juicy or not? Are they talking about me too? So let me remind you that that sentiment is shared. So by stopping gossip in your presence, you've now changed your own professional reputation from someone who should be gossiped with to someone that shouldn't be approached with that gossip. Secondly, forgive someone for how they've treated you in the workplace. Now, mind you, you're not forgiving them because you genuinely think what they did was okay, and you're not necessarily forgiving them to make amends. You're forgiving them because as a leader, you are influencing people. This could be a formal conversation or simply endorsing one of their good ideas in the meeting room you would have historically kept quiet about endorsing. But lastly, genuinely support one another. Authentic support of your fellow leaders is the leadership mark of confidence. Now, I'm going to say something shocking, but you are not in competition with your peers. Your only competition is yourself. Supporting one another can look like many things, but it could be as simple as validating someone's thinking in the meeting room, sending a glowing email to their boss about some good work, or providing visibility when career paths are unclear. These are all things that would make it so you have become a leader, regardless of your title or position. Now, I think what we all want, regardless of where we are in our careers, regardless of gender or age or race, is the opportunity to not only succeed, but thrive. As leaders, you are responsible for upholding the meritocracy, the virtue of company culture. The other week, I was lucky enough to have dinner with Dermot Dumfries, the CEO, former CEO of Sealed Air. Now, if you've never heard of Sealed Air went from $3 million to $3 billion worldwide with Dermot's tenure. Dermot is quoted by Tony James, the executive vice president of Blackstone, for being the one that gave him the best career advice he's ever achieved. At that dinner, he handed me a piece of paper, and it was his principles for life and business. The one that stood out to me the most is this. He said, lead with the conscious commitment to always do the right things. You are all leaders of change and progress, and I encourage you to remember that you are a leader today and from every day today on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melissa. That was wow. A lot to take in and delivered with such flourish. Thank you very much. We're moving on to the theme of men.